Hi there, this is Datila with Rangers of Wrestling, bringing you the Wrestling Time post show. For tonight, I will be reviewing AEW Dynamite. Okay, so tonight's Dynamite was actually really good. I enjoyed tonight's Dynamite. From top to bottom, there's not one thing I disliked about this tonight's show, but it was also a very somber show as the main event paid homage to Jay Briscoe, who tragically passed away 8 days ago in a car accident. Mark Briscoe making his AEW debut by facing off against Jay Lethal. Now, originally, Warner Brothers Media did not want the Briscoes on TV because of due to comments that Jay Briscoe made over a decade ago. The Sports Store reports that the team could be mentioned on AEW TV ahead of Ring of Honor pay-per-views. They never appeared on Dynamite or Rampage, and this rule stood firmly in place in controversial fashion even after the shocking death of Jay Briscoe, with AEW not being allowed to air a tribute show to him on Dynamite the next night. So even after Jay Briscoe passed away, Warner Media would not relent. Yesterday, Tony Khan tweeted a shocking announcement that not only will Mark Briscoe be on Dynamite on Wednesday, he will take on Jay Lethal. So it seems like Warner Media relented. I don't know what made them change their minds, but it just sucks that it took Jay Briscoe's death for Warner Media to finally relent and allow Mark Briscoe to finally appear on AEW Dynamite. Just imagine if Warner Media had just let the Briscoe brothers appear from the get-go after Tony Khan purchased Ring of Honor. They could have been on Dynamite. We would have had the Briscoe brothers on Dynamite. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And so tonight's main event was a Jay Briscoe tribute match, Mark Briscoe versus Jay Lethal. And this was a really, really good match. I enjoyed it. You could see Jay Lethal was holding back tears. And to top it off, today is Jay Briscoe's birthday. Jay Lethal wearing an armband that said Jay on it. Mark Briscoe doing the groggy bow to Jay Lethal through a table. And he finished off Jay Lethal using the Jade Driver. So he won. It was honestly very emotional. After he won, the locker room came out and they showed their respects to Jay. And then Jay Lethal and Mark hugged in the ring. And just like even before the match, like Mark Briscoe came on, he held up both Ring of Honor tag titles. There was just a feeling of somber. I don't know how Mark Briscoe must have felt going out there without his brother and on his brother's birthday wrestling this match. It must have been tough for him to do that. But I thought it was a very lovely tribute. Absolutely loved it. But it just goes to show that tomorrow's not guaranteed, and you should live life to the fullest. But it truly was a great main event, and a beautiful tribute to Jay Briscoe. Okay, so tonight's Dynamite kicked off with the Sex Gods, Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara versus Action Andretti and Ricky Starks. And I have to say, this was a phenomenal way to kick off tonight's show. Great tag team action. Absolutely enjoyed this match. Now, Chris Jericho has been trying to get rid of Action Andretti since Action Andretti beat him in his AEW debut. I actually really like how Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara, when they came out to the ring, they ripped off their pants and they had some red pants on underneath. I just thought it was hilarious. Jericho, he flipped up the crowd during this match. Now, Daniel Garcia was at ringside and he did get involved in this. While Audrey Edwards was distracted, Daniel Garcia hit Action Andretti with the bat. And then Sammy Guevara hit the GTH to Action Andretti and allowing the Les Sex Gods to win. Now, I have to say, one of my favorite spots in this match was when Ricky Starks hit the Rochambeau to Chris Jericho on the floor. So, Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara get the win here, but I don't think this feud is over, especially not by the way that they won. They only won because Daniel Garcia had to use that bat on Action Andretti. So I'm very curious to see where this goes. We're probably going to get another tag match somewhere down the road. We also need a Sammy Guevara versus Action Andretti singles match. I mean, that little spot they had at the beginning of the match, phenomenal, amazing. I need to see a singles match on that. Afterwards, we had a Jay Briscoe video package. I thought it was a very nice video package. Definitely a nice tribute to Jay Briscoe. And we get the TNT Championship match. It's Darby Allin versus Buddy Matthews. And this was a good match. I enjoyed this match. One thing I did notice was that Buddy Matthews, he used the buckle bomb and he followed it up with a stomp on the back of the head. Now that kind of reminded me of Seth frickin' Rollins. If you guys remember back when Buddy Matthews was in the WWE, he was aligned with Seth Rollins. And as we all know, Seth Rollins does do those two maneuvers, the buckle bomb and the stomp. So very surprised that Buddy Matthews used that. But during this match, the lights go out and Brody King and Malachi Black both appear. Ortiz comes out with the kendo stick and he attacks King. Sting and Ortiz chase off Malachi Black and Brody King. Darby Allin wins after he hits the Scorpion Death Drop and the Coffin Drop to Buddy Matthews. And so at the end of the match, we get Tony Schiavone saying that Darby Allin has had 4 successful title defenses in a row since winning the TNT title in Seattle. But of course, Samoa Joe, the true king of television, appears on the Titantron. And he says he's coming back to take what was his and that the king has spoken. So he's basically find out that we're going to get Darby Allin versus Samoa Joe for that TNT title. And as we find out later on in the night, it's going to be a no-holds-barred match. We get an Adam Cole Bay video package. And this video package kind of hints at the fact that he might be at Revolution, as it cuts off when Adam Cole's looking at the Revolution sign. And, you know, I was there live when Adam Cole made his return on Dynamite. And I actually have that video on my YouTube channel if you guys want to check it out. But I did notice something about Adam Cole. He was wearing this green bandana, which reminded me so much of a certain Green Ranger, Jason David Frank. I just got Green Ranger vibes from Adam Cole with that bandana. As you guys can see, he's wearing this green bandana here. And just this shot reminded me of JDF when he would rock a green bandana on Power Rangers. So I definitely did get the Green Ranger vibes from that Adam Cole package. We got Ethan Page and Matt Hardy versus JungleHOOK. This is the second time JungleHOOK teams up together. And I have to say, JungleHOOK does a really good job of being a team. I don't know what I like more, JungleHOOK or Hookhausen. I was a huge fan of Hookhausen, and I had the privilege of seeing Hookhausen team up live at Double or Nothing. So, but I like both forms better. The one thing I thought was hilarious was when Matt Hardy and Ethan Page come out. They come out to Matt Hardy's Hardy Boys theme song. But then Ethan Page orders them to change it to his theme song because he is, you know, the star of that tag team. And JungleHOOK ended up winning this by submission after Ethan Page taps out to the snare trap. And Hook had to pull Matt Hardy off the ring rope. So I think that like I said last time, I think that it's going to lead to Matt Hardy versus Ethan Page, maybe at Revolution, since it's almost February. And if Matt Hardy wins, I think he'll free himself from Ethan Page's contract. So I honestly think that's where that's going. We get family therapy with the Acclaimed, Billy Gunn, and the Gunns. And the Gunns accuse Billy Gunn of being a terrible dad, basically. He says that they always come second to their dad. And their faults as sons are Billy's failures as a father. So the whole gist of this segment is that the Gunns want an AEW tag team title belt opportunity. I can see that happening. I don't know if they'll save this for Revolution, but since we are building towards Revolution, maybe this is going to be the Revolution match. But I'm not surprised if that's what it eventually leads to. Afterwards, we get a Hangman Adam Page backstage interview in which he basically challenges Jon Moxley to a match in Ohio next week on Wednesday. So it's going to be Hangman versus Moxley 3. Wheeler Yuta appears and he accepts Hangman's challenge on behalf of Jon Moxley. And on Rampage, Hangman will face Wheeler Yuta. So I honestly cannot wait for that. So we get Bryan Danielson versus Brian Cage. It was a battle of the Bryans. Bryan Danielson versus Brian Cage. Honestly, this match was a good match. I actually really like this match. You know, Brian Cage, for a guy his size, he can move. He's actually pretty athletic. I think Bryan Danielson brought out a really good side of Brian Cage during this match. Bryan Danielson targeting Brian Cage's knee on here. And I really like that buckle bomb that Brian Cage did to Bryan Danielson, which he followed up with the power bomb. Now, Bryan Danielson ends up winning this match. And of course, if you guys remember last week on Dynamite, MJF offered bounty to Brian Cage to break Bryan Danielson's arm. So at the end of the match, Brian Cage is just assaulting Bryan Danielson. So MJF comes out and he grabs a steel chair. Brian Cage wraps that steel chair around Bryan's arm and he sends him crashing into the ring post. And then Takeshita comes out to help Bryan Danielson. He hits Brian Cage with the jumping knee and MJF just leaves. So after this, we get a follow-up segment with Bryan Danielson. And Doc Samson, it says that Bryan is... I couldn't really understand what Doc Samson was saying here. So I believe Bryan Danielson's injury is kayfabe for this. I honestly kind of thought that they were going to write Bryan Danielson off for a couple weeks and then have him come back before Revolution, but I guess not. So Bryan says that he doesn't care what Doc Samson's opinions are. He's wrestled 60 minutes with a separated shoulder and nobody's stopping him from wrestling. He says that MJF thinks that a monster lies behind his mask, but Bryan says that what really lies behind MJF's mask is fear. And MJF is afraid of getting hurt, afraid of getting exposed, afraid that Bryan's going to take away the one thing that MJF values the most, and that is the AEW World title. He says that he is going to show the whole world what is behind the mask, and that is a fraud, and that the one person who should be and will be AEW champion is Bryan Danielson. And honestly, I feel kind of torn because on one hand, MJF just won that title at Full Gear. So what? That was November 19th. So December, January, February. Revolution is in March 5th. So that would give him like a little over a 3-month title reign. I'm not sure if MJF would actually beat Bryan Danielson or Bryan Danielson would beat him here. I'm kind of torn on this whole situation because on one hand I want MJF to stay champion because you want to give him a decent title run, but if not, if Bryan beats MJF, then we get Bryan as champion, which I feel makes sense. So if Bryan doesn't take the title off MJF, who will? Maybe Jungle Boy? Maybe will follow up with Ricky Starks. So what do you guys think? You guys think Bryan Danielson takes the title off MJF? Or will MJF stay champion? So we get Toni Storm versus Ruby Soho. Okay, so originally this match was supposed to be a 3-way. It was supposed to be Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, versus Toni Storm versus Ruby Soho. But Tony Khan revealed on Busted Open Radio that Tony Schiavone put the news out this morning, and then we tweeted about it. But Dr. Britt Baker is injured. The doctor will not clear her to wrestle tonight, so we can't do the 3-way, but there was an altercation last week between Toni Storm and Ruby Soho. They still want to go one-on-one. I think that's a great match, Toni Storm versus Ruby Soho. Tony Khan then goes on to say that doesn't mean the 3-way match won't happen in the future. Oh, and I got this from the Wrestling Inc. website, the transcription from the Wrestling Inc. website, but that quote came from Tony Khan on Busted Open Radio. So Rhea and Toni Storm turned heel, and it's interesting that they're the ones that turned heel. So I thought Toni Storm was going to win this match, but lo and behold, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, she came out and she caused a distraction, allowing Ruby Soho to hit the Destination Unknown and allowed her to pick up the victory here. Now, it's intriguing that Saraya and Toni Storm are the heels here, and they seem to have a problem with the AEW originals. Now, this is just me fantasy booking here, but what if we get the AEW Originals versus the women of WWE. Okay, so you would have what? Who? You would have Dr. Britt Baker. You'd have Jamie Hayter, possibly Hikaru Shida versus Soraya, Toni Storm, and who would be the third person? You have Ruby Soho turned heel, or you throw Athena into the mix. Could we possibly get a blood and guts match? So who would you align with Soraya and Toni Storm though? You have Ruby Soho turned heel, or you have Athena, or you throw in Athena, because Athena would also be considered a WWE woman from WWE. But how would you add it? Let me see. Very curious how this would play out. But I feel like they're shaping something like that. I know commentary mentioned something about battle lines being drawn, so it seems like that's what it's heading to. The Originals versus the women of WWE. We get an MJF promo, and MJF is talking about how Takeshita should stay out of his business because there will be consequences. And he believes Bryan is going to keep marching towards March 5th at Revolution. And he says that he knows Bryan is obsessed, just like MJF is obsessed with the Triple B. And that belt gives MJF a reason to get out of bed every morning, because the belt stands for the simple fact that all his blood, sweat, hard work, tears, and sins were all worth it. And the belt turns his catchphrase into a fact. The belt does make him better than you, and you know it. So at the end, we find out that Tony Khan issued an open contract. So MJF made a phone call, and we find out where it's going to be Bryan Danielson versus Timothy Thatcher next week on Dynamite, which should be a good match. And this leads into the main event, which I said at the beginning was Jay Briscoe tribute match. Mark Briscoe versus Jay Lethal was a really good match and a nice tribute to Jay Briscoe. Well, with that being said, that concludes this review. I thought tonight's show was I actually really liked tonight's show. I really did. There's not one thing I disliked about tonight's show. So for that reason, I have to give tonight's show a Sean Spears perfect 10 out of 10. But with that being said, you guys, thank you guys all so much for watching and for the continuous support. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell so you get notified whenever I go live or release a new video. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.